Imagine this, a Friday night at one of the city's most exclusive clubs. The kind of place with a velvet rope, expensive drinks, and a crowd that's dressed to the nines. Inside, music thumps and laughter fills the air as people dance and enjoy their night out. Outside, a line wraps around the building, with people waiting, hopeful that tonight they'll get past that coveted entrance. Our story begins when one man, after a long week, decides he wants to have a night out. He's dressed sharp, looking his best, feeling ready to unwind and join the crowd in the buzzing club. He's excited. This is a place he's been hearing about for a while, the kind of spot where everyone seems to want to be. So he confidently walks up to the entrance, feeling ready to blend into the night's energy. But as he approaches, he notices the bouncers exchanging looks, eyes narrowing slightly. He hands over his ID, the bouncers give it a glance, then look him over from head to toe. There's an uncomfortable pause, and then, without much explanation, he's told he's not getting in. At first, he thinks it's just a mistake. Maybe he misunderstood, maybe it's too crowded. But as he waits to the side, he notices others, people dressed just like him, some even a bit more casually, being waved in without a second glance. Confused and a bit embarrassed, he tries again, asking if there's a reason. But he's met watches as others approach the bouncers, some in groups, others alone, and without hesitation, they're welcomed in with friendly nods, quick checks of their IDs, and easy smiles. He notices how some are even let in after casual laughter and a pat on the back, as if they're old friends with the staff. But him? He's asked to step aside, waiting in the chilly evening air as minutes pass by, each one making the situation feel stranger. Confused but trying to stay calm, he approaches the bouncer again and politely asks if there's a reason he can't come in. Maybe it's a members-only night. Or perhaps there's an issue with his ID? He's open to hearing any reasonable explanation. But instead, he's met with a blank stare, and the bouncer responds with a curt, "Not tonight." The words are short, dismissive, and carry an edge that's impossible to ignore. He feels a knot form in his stomach, sensing there's something unspoken, something more to this rejection than just capacity limits, or a casual decision. Others nearby begin to notice. Some glance in his direction, curious or perhaps sensing the tension, while others don't even pay attention, swept up in their own excitement. He tries to brush it off, thinking that maybe he's just overthinking it. But then, another person approaches the entrance, a man wearing jeans and a simple shirt, someone who looks far less dressed up than he is. Yet, with a quick smile, this person is waved right inside without a second thought. That's when it starts to become clear. It's not about how he's dressed or anything specific he's done. He feels a sinking feeling as he realizes it might be something he can't change, something deeper and more personal. He starts to wonder if this is a pattern, if others who look like him would get the same treatment. But he quickly pushes the thought aside, telling himself there must be some other explanation. Maybe he's just in the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe he missed some kind of rule he didn't know about. He decides to step back and observe, quietly watching as more people arrive. Each time someone who doesn't look like him walks up, they're let in without hesitation. And every time, it's a reminder, a feeling that grows heavier with each glance from the bouncers, each silent message that says, "Not you." He checks his watch, feeling the minutes ticking by, and wonders if he should just leave. Part of him wants to walk away, but another part of him refuses to back down, to let this experience define his night. As he stands there, a few people in line start to notice his situation. Some give him sympathetic looks, while others seem uncomfortable, as if they can sense the awkwardness but aren't sure what to do. A couple standing nearby whispers to each other, casting glances in his direction, their expressions a mix of discomfort and curiosity. It's clear that they see what's happening, but no one says a word. It's as if everyone knows something is off, but no one wants to be the one to address it. Finally, one of the bouncers steps toward him again, as if to make it clear that he's not welcome. This time, he looks the bouncer in the eye and calmly asks, "Can you just tell me why I'm not allowed in?" There's a brief pause, and for a moment, it seems like the bouncer might respond honestly. But instead, he just shrugs, giving a vague answer about club policy and steps back, leaving him once again on the outside. Feeling a mix of frustration, anger, and sadness, he decides to take out his phone. He considers recording the situation. Not to create a scene but to document what's happening. But then, as he lifts his phone, he hesitates. He doesn't want to turn this into a confrontation, he just wants an explanation, a reason that makes sense. So he puts the phone away and instead watches as the line continues to move, as more people are ushered inside without a second glance. Just as he's about to give up and leave, a group of people approaches the entrance, talking and laughing loudly. One of them notices him standing to the side and, sensing his frustration, strikes up a conversation. They ask him if he's been waiting long, and he nods, briefly explaining what's been going on. The group exchanges looks, clearly surprised, and one of them offers to go in with him, thinking maybe there's been some misunderstanding. Relieved, he agrees, hoping that with someone by his side, he might finally get through the door. But as they approach the entrance together, the bouncers don't even hesitate. They wave the group through, letting each one pass until they reach him. The bouncer stops him once again, blocking his way, and this time, there's no subtlety in the look he's given. The message is clear, and everyone around him can see it. His new acquaintances look stunned, some of them even try to argue on his behalf, saying he's with them, but the bouncer doesn't budge. "He's not on the list," the bouncer says simply, even though the group never needed a list to get in themselves. It's in this moment that the reality of the situation hits him fully. The words he's been avoiding, the thoughts he didn't want to entertain, are now impossible to ignore. He's being treated differently for reasons that have nothing to do with his behavior, his clothes, or anything he could control. It's a realization that's both painful and infuriating, one that leaves him feeling helpless and humiliated in front of strangers. As the group heads inside, some of them give him apologetic looks, as if they feel his pain but don't know what else to say. He stands there alone once more, watching them disappear into the club, their laughter fading as they enter a world he's been denied access to. Part of him wants to confront the bouncer directly, to demand answers, but he knows it likely won't change anything. He's seen this before, in different forms, but tonight it's blatant, unmistakable. Taking a deep breath, he steps back, trying to steady himself. He could walk away, forget the night, and let it become another story of what could have been. But something in him refuses to let this go. He wants to respond, to do something that makes a statement not out of anger, but out of a desire for change, for acknowledgement, for something better. And in that moment, a plan starts to form in his mind, one that's both bold and risky. Without saying a word, he turns and walks away from the club, leaving the sounds of laughter and music behind. But he's not defeated. In fact, he feels more determined than ever. As he walks away from the club, he feels a surge of determination, mixed with a bit of uncertainty. Part of him wants to shake it off and forget the whole thing, but another part keeps thinking back to that moment, the look on the bouncer's face, and the silence that followed when no one stepped up to question it. It's as though the entire night is replaying in his mind on a loop, each scene reminding him of what just happened. But rather than feeling defeated, he feels something else, a need to act, to do something about it. He heads home, his thoughts racing. He doesn't want this to just be another story, another incident that quietly fades into the past. He knows others have faced this same kind of treatment, and he's tired of letting things slide, tired of people making excuses or turning a blind eye. It's clear that the club has an unspoken rule, one that allows them to judge and exclude without consequence. And he's ready to bring that to light. The next day, he decides to share his experience online, carefully crafting a message that captures what happened without bitterness or exaggeration. He wants people to understand the reality of it, the feeling of being judged and dismissed for something beyond his control. Within hours, his post starts to gain traction. Comments pour in, some from people who are outraged on his behalf, others sharing similar stories of times they were made to feel out of place in certain spaces. The post becomes a conversation starter, sparking debates about discrimination, privilege, and the unspoken rules that seem to exist in places meant for everyone to enjoy. Soon, his story catches the attention of a local journalist who reaches out to learn more. She's working on a piece about discrimination in social spaces, and his experience fits perfectly with the angle she's exploring. During their conversation, he opens up about the frustration and hurt he felt that night, the subtle but undeniable exclusion. The journalist listens intently, asking questions that help him unpack the experience even further. By the end of the interview, he feels a mix of relief and hope, knowing that his story will be part of something larger, something that might bring about change. As the article goes live, it spreads quickly, sparking conversations on social media and within the community. People are tagging the club, asking questions, demanding answers. Some share their own experiences, while others express shock and disappointment that such blatant exclusion could happen in a place that claims to welcome everyone. The club's management stays silent at first, but as the pressure builds, they're forced to release a statement. It's brief and vague, mentioning a misunderstanding and stating that they're committed to inclusivity. Yet, to him and many others, the words ring hollow. Feeling unsatisfied, he decides to dig deeper, looking into the club's policies and reputation. What he finds only confirms what he already suspected. There are countless stories from people who were treated differently based on factors they couldn't control. Some were asked to wait while others breathed inside, others were turned away for vague reasons or faced silent judgment from staff. It becomes clear that this isn't an isolated incident, it's a pattern, one that's been ignored or excused for far too long. Meanwhile, the club's regular patrons start weighing in, offering their own perspectives. Some defend the club, saying it's a private business with the right to set its own rules. Others argue that the exclusivity is part of the appeal, a way to maintain a certain vibe. But these arguments only fuel the conversation, with people pointing out that vibe shouldn't come at the expense of excluding people based on who they are. As days go by, more people join the conversation, each bringing their own stories and perspectives. A group of local activists even reaches out to him, offering support and encouraging him to keep pushing for answers. They suggest organizing a peaceful gathering outside the club, a way to bring attention to the issue and demand accountability. Though hesitant at first, he agrees, realizing that this could be a powerful way to make his voice heard. The gathering is planned for the following weekend, and word spreads quickly. People from all walks of life show up, holding signs and chanting messages of inclusion and equality. Some of the club's regular patrons stand nearby, watching in disbelief as the crowd grows. It's a peaceful but powerful display, a reminder that everyone deserves respect and fair treatment, regardless of appearance or background. Throughout the demonstration, he sees familiar faces, people who commented on his post, the journalist who wrote the article, and even a few strangers who came to show their support. There's a sense of unity in the crowd, a feeling that they're all standing up for something bigger than any one person. As the evening goes on, the energy builds, with people sharing their own experiences of being excluded or judged, each story adding depth to the conversation. Inside the club, the atmosphere is tense. Staff and patrons alike are aware of the demonstration outside, and many are uncomfortable, unsure of how to react. Some patrons quietly leave, not wanting to be associated with a place that's now at the center of such a heated issue. Others stay, pretending not to notice the growing movement outside. The management, watching from a distance, begins to realize that this won't just go away with a simple statement or empty promise. As the night draws to a close, he stands outside, looking up at the club that sparked it all. He feels a mixture of exhaustion and hope, knowing that he's sparked a conversation that needed to happen. And while he's still frustrated by the events of that night, he knows he's taken a stand, creating something positive out of a painful experience. But even as he heads home, the conflict remains unresolved. The club still hasn't taken responsibility, and the issues they represent go far beyond one night or one place. He knows this is just the beginning, that the real challenge lies in changing a mindset, a culture that silently allows discrimination to continue unchecked. He's ready to keep pushing, to keep speaking out not just for himself, but for everyone who's ever felt the sting of exclusion. As days pass, the tension around the club grows. The protest outside wasn't just a one-time event, it became a symbol, a gathering point for people in the community to rally around the issue. More people come forward, sharing stories of similar experiences at other venues, times when they were quietly turned away, given strange looks, or made to feel that they didn't belong. The stories resonate with so many that it starts to feel like a movement, a demand for change that's been building under the surface for years. Social media buzzes with reactions, and the local news stations begin covering the story in depth, bringing more attention to what happened that night. People are questioning the club's practices, asking why these unspoken rules exist and why certain people are treated differently based on factors beyond their control. Some even call for boycotts, urging others to stop supporting businesses that allow discrimination to thrive. The club's name is everywhere, and the management finds itself in an increasingly difficult position. Behind closed doors, the club's owners are scrambling. They never expected this much backlash, and they certainly didn't anticipate that a single incident would ignite such an outcry. They meet to discuss damage control, consulting PR experts and crafting statements that feel safe and neutral, hoping to calm the storm without making any real changes. But each statement only fuels the fire, with people calling them out for sidestepping the issue and refusing to address the root of the problem. The club's regular patrons start to question whether they want to continue supporting a place that's now become a lightning rod for controversy. Meanwhile, he watches all of this unfold, feeling a mix of satisfaction and frustration. He's glad people are finally paying attention, that the story is sparking real conversations. But part of him can't shake the feeling that it's not enough. Statements and vague promises don't change the fact that, deep down, there's a mentality that still allows people to be treated differently. He wants to believe that things can get better, that this will lead to real change, but he knows that words alone won't make that happen. One evening, he receives an unexpected message from a former employee of the club. The message is short and cryptic, suggesting that the club has a hidden list of people they prioritize or, in some cases, deliberately exclude. Curious and intrigued, he agrees to meet this person in a quiet CAF, hoping to learn more. When they sit down, the former employee confirms his suspicions, revealing that the club's management holds unofficial standards that certain patrons are expected to meet. These standards aren't written down anywhere, but they're understood and enforced by everyone working there. Hearing this confirmation, he feels a renewed sense of anger. It's one thing to suspect it, but another to hear it directly from someone who witnessed it firsthand. The former employee describes how they would sometimes be instructed to keep things exclusive, a vague command that often translated into unfairly judging people based on their appearance, background, or simply whether they seemed to fit in with the club's usual crowd. The former employee admits that they left because they couldn't stand being part of a system that quietly discriminated, that made people feel small for reasons that had nothing to do with who they truly were. Leaving the CAF, he feels a strange combination of clarity and resolve. It's no longer just about what happened to him, it's about challenging a mindset that allows people to be categorized and dismissed. He realizes that this issue goes beyond any one club. It's a reflection of a larger problem, one that affects countless people who are judged before they even have a chance to prove who they are. As he heads home, he gets a notification. His story has caught the attention of a prominent civil rights organization that wants to meet with him. They offer to support his efforts and bring their resources to help amplify the message. Excited but cautious, he agrees to meet, unsure of where this could lead but feeling that it might be the break he needs to make a real impact. The meeting takes place in a small conference room, where he's introduced to a team of people who have spent years fighting for equality and fairness. They listen carefully as he recounts his story, nodding and understanding, their expressions serious but supportive. They explain that they've seen cases like this before, that discrimination in nightlife and social spaces is a widespread but often overlooked issue. With their support, he begins planning a larger campaign aimed at addressing these issues directly, one that will hold clubs and other businesses accountable for their actions. The organization suggests organizing a public event, a forum where people can share their experiences and discuss the problem openly. The idea excites him, and he immediately begins reaching out to those who commented on his posts, inviting them to come forward and share their stories. As word spreads, more people express interest, eager to be part of a movement that challenges exclusion and advocates for a more inclusive community. The night of the event arrives, and the venue is filled with people from all backgrounds, each one with their own story to tell. He takes the stage, nervous but determined, and starts by sharing what happened to him. How that single night led him here. He talks about the pain of being judged unfairly, the frustration of feeling powerless, and the importance of standing up for one's worth. The audience listens in silence, some nodding in agreement, others visibly moved by his words. One by one, others come forward to speak, each story adding to the collective narrative of exclusion and judgment. Some describe similar experiences at other clubs, while others share stories from workplaces, schools, and everyday life. It becomes clear that the issue goes far beyond the nightlife scene. It's a reflection of a society that still holds unspoken biases, one that often ignores or excuses subtle discrimination. As the night goes on, the atmosphere grows tense but hopeful. People in the audience talk about what they can do to support change, sharing ideas and making connections. For the first time, he feels a sense of unity, a belief that real change is possible. The event is a success, and he leaves feeling both inspired and empowered, knowing that this is no longer just his fight, it's something that people are willing to stand up for, something that matters to everyone in the room. But as the excitement fades, he realizes the hardest part is yet to come. The club has remained silent, watching from a distance as the movement grows, but refusing to address the issue directly. He knows that their silence is a strategy, a way of waiting for the storm to pass so they can continue business as usual. He feels a mix of frustration and determination, knowing that he can't let this issue quietly fade away. Then, one night, he receives an email from a well-known documentary filmmaker who has taken an interest in the story. They propose creating a short film that dives deep into the issue, capturing the impact of discrimination in social spaces and the emotional toll it takes on those affected. He agrees immediately, feeling that this could be the platform he needs to keep the conversation alive, to make sure people don't forget. Filming begins, and he finds himself reliving the events of that night, recalling the hurt and frustration he felt. The filmmaker captures every moment, every emotion, and includes interviews with others who experienced similar incidents. It's a raw and honest portrayal, one that doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of discrimination. As the documentary nears completion, word of it spreads, and people start paying attention again. The club's management catches wind of it too, and for the first time, they feel real pressure to respond. But instead of an apology, they issue a statement accusing him of sensationalizing the story and misrepresenting their practices. They claim that he's using the incident for personal gain, trying to paint himself as a victim to gain attention. This response hits him hard. After everything he's done, all the support he's built, he feels like they're trying to undermine everything, casting doubt on his intentions. But instead of backing down, he decides to confront them directly, refusing to let their accusations silence him. He knows that the truth is on his side, and he's prepared to fight for it, no matter how difficult the road ahead might be. He's come too far to let this end now. And as the tension reaches its peak, he knows that this moment will be the turning point, the climax that will determine how everything unfolds from here. As he prepares to confront the club's accusations, something unexpected happens. One evening, just as he's putting the finishing touches on a public response, he receives a message from someone claiming to be an insider at the club, a current employee who's seen everything that's been unfolding and has quietly observed the management's tactics. This person explains that they can't reveal their identity for fear of losing their job, but hints that they have crucial information that could turn the entire situation around. Intrigued but cautious, he agrees to meet the anonymous employee in a quiet, out-of-the-way CAF. When they finally sit down, he can sense the person's nervousness, glancing over their shoulder as if they expect someone to be watching. They explain that the club's response to his story wasn't just a defensive tactic, it was part of a carefully crafted strategy. According to this source, the club's management had anticipated backlash from the start, and had even planned to push back by questioning his credibility, portraying him as someone who blew things out of proportion for attention. This revelation leaves him stunned. It's one thing to be discriminated against, but to realize that the club is actively manipulating public perception to silence him feels like a new betrayal. The insider goes on to share that management had briefed the staff to keep quiet about any incidents involving discrimination. Those who had spoken out in the past were pressured to either retract their statements or face consequences. This unofficial code of silence had been in place for years, ensuring that complaints about unfair treatment would never see the light of day. Hearing this only deepens his resolve. He realizes that he's not just fighting for his own experience to be heard, he's fighting to break through a long-standing pattern of exclusion and intimidation that has affected countless others. To make matters worse, the anonymous employee reveals that the club has hired a team of PR specialists who have been digging into his past, looking for anything they can use to undermine his story. They're attempting to find inconsistencies or even moments from his history they can twist to make him seem less credible. It's a tactic designed to distract the public from the core issue by turning the focus onto him instead of the club's discriminatory practices. He leaves the meeting feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The stakes are higher now, and he knows that this battle is about more than just clearing his name. He's determined to bring the truth to light, to show that this isn't just a single incident but part of a calculated system designed to silence those who dare to speak up. But he also realizes that he's walking a fine line. The club is well-resourced, powerful, and clearly willing to do whatever it takes to protect its image, even if it means launching a personal attack against him. In the days that follow, he works with the filmmaker to incorporate these new revelations into the documentary. They decide to use the insider's story anonymously, protecting their identity while adding a layer of depth to the film that captures the full extent of what's happening behind the scenes. The filmmaker interviews others who have faced similar experiences, weaving their stories together to paint a picture that's impossible to ignore. It's no longer just about his one night at the club, it's about a widespread issue, a culture that thrives on exclusion and operates with impunity. As the release date for the documentary approaches, tension builds. People are eagerly anticipating the film, especially after hearing hints of what it might reveal. The club's management, sensing the pressure mounting, doubles down on their efforts to discredit him. They release another statement, this time accusing him of stirring up division and creating unnecessary controversy. They claim that his actions are hurting local businesses and turning people against each other. It's a final attempt to regain control, to convince the public that he's the problem, not them. But he isn't deterred. In fact, the club's latest statement only strengthens his resolve. He sees through their tactics and realizes that they're afraid of what might happen if people see the truth. He knows that the documentary, once released, will leave no room for doubt. The stories, the interviews, the footage, it's all there, laid out in a way that can't be dismissed or ignored. The night of the documentary's premiere arrives, and he's both excited and nervous. People from all walks of life have shown up to watch, eager to see what's been kept hidden for so long. As the film begins, the audience is silent, drawn into the stories and the raw emotions captured on screen. They see him recounting that night, the pain and frustration he felt, and then hear from others who experienced the same kind of exclusion, the same subtle but powerful judgment. The insider's story is included as well, their voice altered to protect their identity, and the audience is shocked to hear about the club's code of silence. As the documentary reaches its climax, there's a palpable sense of tension in the room. People are beginning to understand the full scale of the issue, the way these unspoken rules impact not just him but countless others who have been pushed to the margins. He watches the reactions of the audience, some nodding in understanding, others visibly moved by the stories they're hearing. He feels a mix of relief and anticipation, knowing that the truth is finally out there, impossible to ignore. But just as the film ends, as he begins to think that the tide is finally turning, a new twist catches him off guard. He's approached by a representative from a prominent legal firm that specializes in civil rights cases. They've seen the documentary, and they believe he has grounds to take legal action against the club. The idea surprises him. He hadn't considered going down that path. But the representative explains that the evidence is compelling, especially with the insider's testimony and the numerous accounts from others who face similar treatment. A lawsuit, they argue, could be the final step in holding the club accountable and setting a precedent for other businesses that operate under the same unspoken rules. The decision weighs on him. A lawsuit would mean more public scrutiny, more battles, and likely an even more aggressive response from the club. But it would also mean a chance to create real change, to make sure that this issue isn't just talked about for a few weeks and then forgotten. He wrestles with the decision, knowing that this could be the opportunity he's been waiting for but also aware of the toll it could take. As he stands there, contemplating his next move, he glances at the audience members still discussing the film, their conversations filled with urgency and emotion. He can feel the weight of their support, the unspoken encouragement urging him to keep going. And in that moment, he realizes that this isn't just about him anymore. It's about standing up for everyone who's been made to feel small, everyone who's been silenced or dismissed. With a newfound sense of determination, he tells the representative that he's willing to move forward. He knows the road ahead will be challenging, filled with obstacles and opposition. But he's ready, prepared to take on whatever comes next. And as he walks away from the premiere, surrounded by supporters and allies, he can feel that this is only the beginning of something much larger, something that might finally bring the change he's been fighting for. As he moves forward with the lawsuit, word spreads quickly. The case becomes a media sensation, drawing even more attention than the documentary. News outlets cover every step, and social media is filled with people passionately discussing both sides. Some express doubts, questioning if a lawsuit is truly necessary, while others see it as a powerful stand against discrimination. The club's management, feeling the heat, hires an aggressive legal team to fight back. They counter with their own accusations, painting him as an opportunist and doubling down on their narrative that he's trying to destroy a respected establishment. But he's prepared. He's gathered evidence, witnesses, and support from people in the community, including the insider who first tipped him off. The trial begins, and tensions are high as both sides present their cases. The club's lawyers argue that his experience was a misunderstanding, a case of simple miscommunication, nothing more. They claim that the club has never endorsed discrimination, insisting that any perceived exclusion was unintentional. Their arguments are polished, carefully crafted, but they lack the emotional weight of the stories he presents. One by one, witnesses take the stand to share their own experiences, each story weaving a pattern that's hard to ignore. The insider's testimony is powerful, recounting the unspoken rules and standards that staff were expected to follow. When the club's lawyers attempt to dismiss this, claiming it's merely one person's perspective, another former employee steps forward, corroborating the insider's story and adding their own account of how the management encouraged certain behaviors without ever putting them in writing. The testimony is damning, and it's clear that the jury is beginning to understand the extent of the club's practices. As the trial reaches its final day, he takes the stand, sharing his story one last time. He speaks openly about the hurt he felt, the disbelief, and the anger at being turned away for reasons that had nothing to do with who he was. He talks about the importance of standing up, not just for himself, but for everyone who has been made to feel less than. The courtroom is silent as he finishes, the weight of his words hanging in the air. He knows he's done everything he can. Now, it's up to the jury. After hours of deliberation, the jury reaches a verdict. They find in his favor, declaring that the club's actions were indeed discriminatory. It's a victory, one that's met with cheers from the supporters gathered outside the courthouse. The decision sends a clear message to other businesses: these kinds of practices won't be tolerated anymore. He feels a surge of relief and satisfaction, knowing that he's won not just for himself but for everyone who has faced similar treatment. But just as he's celebrating the win, an unexpected twist emerges. One of the jurors, moved by the case, steps forward and reveals something astonishing. They used to be a frequent patron of the club. They share a story about how they had once brought a friend to the club, a friend who didn't quite fit the club's usual profile. That night, the juror noticed the subtle ways the staff treated their friend differently, ways that felt unwelcoming, almost hostile. They hadn't fully understood it at the time, chalking it up to a bad vibe, but watching the trial unfold made them realize the club's true nature. They admit that sitting on the jury brought back memories of that night, memories they could no longer ignore. This revelation spreads quickly, sparking a new wave of public discussion. People start examining their own experiences, questioning moments when they may have overlooked subtle exclusion or made excuses for behavior that didn't feel right. The juror's confession becomes a wake-up call, challenging people to be more aware, more willing to question places and behaviors they once took for granted. It becomes clear that the case has done more than expose one club. It's prompted a shift in how people think about inclusion, about the importance of welcoming others without judgment. With the trial behind him, he steps into a new role, one he never expected but fully embraces. He begins speaking out, sharing his story and advocating for inclusivity in other social spaces, urging businesses to rethink their practices and focus on creating genuinely welcoming environments. He partners with community leaders, working to establish guidelines for inclusive policies that other venues can follow. His story continues to resonate, inspiring others to speak up, to share their own stories, and to demand change where it's needed. In the end, the club's reputation takes a massive hit. Membership declines, and even their regular patrons start questioning whether they want to support an establishment with such a history. The management scrambles to salvage their image, making a series of public apologies and promises to do better. But the damage is done, and people are no longer willing to turn a blind eye. As he looks back on everything that's happened, he feels a deep sense of accomplishment. He started with nothing but a single painful experience, and now he's part of a movement that's making a difference. It wasn't an easy journey, and he knows the fight for inclusivity is far from over, but he's proud to have been part of this change, to have helped create a future where people can feel valued and accepted, no matter where they go. And as he walks away from the courthouse for the last time, surrounded by friends, family, and supporters, he feels a sense of closure, a feeling that, finally, justice has been served. With the trial behind him and the dust settling, he felt a strange mix of relief and a lingering sense of disbelief at everything that had unfolded. What had started as a single, painful encounter turned into something so much larger, a movement that took on a life of its own, reaching people he never even met but who resonated with his story. As he reflected on the journey, he realized how much strength he'd drawn from those around him, supporters, friends, and even strangers who had encouraged him to keep going when things felt impossibly tough. Word of the trial's outcome spread far and wide, and the impact was tangible. He started receiving messages from people across the country, even internationally, sharing similar experiences, thanking him for standing up, and asking how they could bring about change in their own communities. He was humbled by it all, realizing that his experience was not isolated but rather part of a broader, persistent issue. His courage to face it head-on inspired others to reevaluate their surroundings, their circles, and the places they frequented. It was a shift in perspective that went beyond one man or one club. It was about questioning environments that foster exclusivity, and creating spaces where everyone could feel welcomed. Even though he hadn't set out to become a spokesperson for change, he found himself in that role and embraced it with a renewed sense of purpose. He began working with advocacy groups to promote inclusivity in social spaces, speaking at events, and even consulting with businesses interested in creating more welcoming environments. His goal was simple: to help people feel they belonged, no matter where they went. In a way, this work became a form of healing, allowing him to channel the pain of that initial experience into something positive, something that could help others avoid the same hurt. The club, meanwhile, was facing the consequences of its actions. Their once exclusive reputation took a hard hit, and their membership dwindled as more and more people reconsidered their affiliations. The management attempted a series of half-hearted apologies and issued statements promising reforms, but the damage was too deep. People saw through the performative gestures, recognizing that real change couldn't happen overnight and certainly couldn't come without genuine accountability. Eventually, the club rebranded and attempted to reopen with a new image, but it was clear that things would never be the same. The once untouchable reputation they had held on to for so long was now permanently marred by the revelations that had come to light. As time passed, he stayed committed to his mission, continuing to advocate for acceptance and openness in all spaces. He saw small victories here and there: businesses implementing better policies, communities opening up to conversations about inclusivity, and people feeling more empowered to speak up when they saw or experienced discrimination. Each of these changes felt like a step forward, a way to honor not just his journey but everyone's who had experienced similar situations. In the quiet moments, he sometimes thought back to that night at the club and the overwhelming frustration that had set everything in motion. He knew he could never undo that experience, but he also knew he wouldn't have changed a thing about how he responded. Standing up had taken courage, and although he'd faced plenty of doubt and resistance, he had ultimately transformed something painful into something that could make a difference. Reflecting on all that had happened, he found peace in the knowledge that his story had sparked something meaningful. People everywhere were talking about the importance of inclusivity, of creating spaces where everyone was truly welcome. He knew there would still be battles to fight, and that discrimination wouldn't disappear overnight. But he also knew that progress had been made, and that change was possible. He carried this message forward, encouraging others to embrace differences, to recognize the value in diversity, and to advocate for spaces where everyone could belong. His journey became more than just a story about one man standing up against a single club. It became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that every person deserves respect, and that no one should ever feel they don't belong simply for being who they are. In the end, he realized that the most important lesson was not about victory in court, or even about public recognition. It was about understanding the power of one voice, the strength that can come from speaking up, and the impact that one person can make when they refuse to stay silent. With that, he felt a sense of closure, knowing that he had done his part to bring about a change that, however small, had the potential to inspire a brighter, more inclusive future for everyone.